Okay, good evening, everyone. I am Robert. Good evening, everyone. I am Robert Falcioni, the editor of Hopkinton News, online only at hopnews.com. Welcome to our weekly Friday at 6 p.m. Live on Main presentation, where we interview an up-and-coming, already there, member of the community who has a lot to contribute, or can contribute a lot this evening. With me this evening, once again, we're pleased to present Dr. Arthur Ciaramicoli for his encore presentation this evening. Hello, Doctor. Good to see you.
Bob, thanks for having me again.
My pleasure. You know, I had to ask you to come back again because I couldn't figure out the cognitive
Behavioral therapy,
and I certainly couldn't make it happen myself. So, would you mind explaining just what that is? Maybe pretend I'm in third grade.
Okay. Cognitive behavioral therapy basically focuses on the way we distort reality, the way we distort the truth. Like people who have learned early in life to generalize, black and white thinking, catastrophizing, accentuating. When you're frowning and I think you're mad at me, but I find out later that you have a headache. It really focuses on perceiving accurately. The more accurately we perceive, the less stress we have. When we perceive inaccurately, we produce the stress hormone cortisol, which has many, many negative effects.
I see. And so that's if you mistakenly have stress, so or have something affect you in the way that it causes you stress. But it could be something that's not really a stressor, but you perceive it that way.
Right. I mean, most of stress is caused by the way we perceive, the way we learned early in life to perceive. So if our parents had prejudices toward other cultures or other kinds of people, or if we have prejudices toward ourselves, it produces stress because we're imagining a story. We're creating a movie inside ourselves that actually doesn't exist. It happens a lot when you see people are uncomfortable with people that they haven't been exposed to before. So if they haven't been exposed to a certain culture or a certain religion, they automatically start to feel stressed because they've heard certain stories about these kind of people, and they imagine certain outcomes that are not really happening. And that produces the stress hormone cortisol, which has many, many negative effects.
Why do you call therapy if what you're describing is a negative experience? How is that a therapy?
Well, it's not it's teaching people to abandon the negative experience, unlearn the distorted ways they've learned to perceive, so that it can perceive the truth about themselves and others.
Okay. I kind of enjoyed when you said something about cultures you may not be used to and so forth. I don't know who these people are, but I enjoy going to the Esplanade on the 4th of July. Now, I wouldn't think of going there a week before and engaging who was there at that time, which is people on skates and walking around with a headset and reading a book or writing a book, all these different things. I wouldn't even think of interrupting them. Or maybe I would, but but usually I don't. But I wouldn't think nothing of on the day of the 4th of July to go into someone's tent and start beating a drum with them. With a stick or with my hands, and engaging them in and they seem to be very open to that kind of behavior too.
Well, that's because you're open-minded and you don't have a prejudice about them. You're not assuming anything about them. And when we have stress, we're assuming a lot of things about other people that we don't know are factual.
I see. So is that beneficial, or is it? I mean, I don't know if the people are gang murderers or serial killers or what they are, and so would that put someone at a disadvantage to have that openness?
Well, that's why I focus in the book on empathy, because empathy is the ability to read other people accurately, to see beyond the surface into the heart and soul of other people. And empathy teaches us who to get close to and who to remain distant from, because empathy slows us down instead of moving in quickly to make assumptions and determine who we think we're interacting with. Empathy slows us down so we can gather the facts, and then we make a decision.
So it's good to observe first, maybe.
Yes.
Observe first, and then see how you fit into this group of people banging drums and whatever else they're doing, using other instruments and so forth. And so I'll feel more comfortable, even more comfortable, next 4th of July, and I'm going to make a point of going to the Esplanade and see if I can't join in with some tent musicians once again, and have a good time. So what would be a major part of this cognitive behavioral therapy?
Well, I mean, the book really, The Stress Solution, is a combination of empathy and cognitive behavioral therapy. Cognitive behavioral therapy, as I said, focuses on distorted thinking. Empathy slows us down enough so that we can read other people accurately and ourselves. It's very different than sympathy. Sympathy rushes into console right away, and you assume that I know what you're all about based on my identification with a certain experience that you've had. So if you're from Hopkinton and I'm from Hopkinton and we discover that in CVS, I assume we have certain similarities, which is not necessarily true. Empathy slows down a process to really find out the facts. It's focused on understanding, where sympathy moves in very quickly and assumes we have likeness when we don't necessarily.
And you really have to, do you find that the people who are far away from the empathic thinking and cognitive behavior, do you think that people who are far away from that need to keep refreshing it? Like, is there a disorder where someone has to see you every week and say, oh, my empathy is low, can I get a
Well, empathy is
wine or something?
Empathy is something we have to practice. It's like a muscle. If you don't use it, it atrophies. And the book is really a workbook. That at the end of every chapter, I have assignments that I give people and actually ask them to take an action at the end of each chapter.
And it's available on Amazon.
Yes.
And where else?
Amazon, Barnes & Noble, all the online bookstores.
The Stress Solution, using empathy and cognitive behavioral therapy to reduce anxiety and develop resilience. You know what I'm finding is working for me is putting this darn politics out of my mind and filling it with other things.
You're about the 100th person who's told me that in the last 2 weeks.
But it's working. Now, when we met 3 or 4 weeks ago, I was really having anxiety.
Yes.
And so I wondered, how am I going to deal with this? Because I can't get into the arguments anymore. Because people make assumptions about each other when they have one position. Some people, I think you call it mind reading, think that you fall into all these other positions.
Yes.
Because for the partisans, they really do that. They really say, well, I'm a Democrat, so here's what I believe.
Yes.
And it pretty much falls in line with the other Democrats is what they believe. And the same with the Republicans, and there's the new wing of the Republicans, I call it that. Sorry, Rob. Rob's going to get mad at me, but I'll take it back. I take it back. So I wrestled with it so much, and had so many conversations that, and one of them was because of a conversation you and I had that somebody watched, and it was the individual thought I was calling one group Democrats and another group right-wingers. But I wasn't. I was calling Democrats and right-wingers right-wingers. And there's a difference in both parties between the types of individuals that there are. So I found, no, I'm not trying to take away from your business. Sure. Yeah, right. Like I'm going to help anyone. So I found that just filling my mind with other things is going to help me get over this anxiety. It's going to help me with relationships, because it is what it is. Overthinking too much about it isn't going to change anything except me.
Well, the stress rates in our country have been accentuated significantly in the last 5 years, but they went up even more during the presidential race and after the election. And what I try to focus on with people is that a lot of times when we weren't talking about Trump and Clinton, we were talking about ourselves. And it brought a lot of people out of the woodwork to really say what they believe in, what their values and what their beliefs are. People have said to me, how can you sit with people who voted for her or voted for him? You know what I say? Well, with empathy, you slow down the process, and when someone tells me a certain something about either candidate, I ask them, how did you learn that? What are the facts? Where did you obtain your facts? That's what empathy does. But really, I don't think it was just about the election. I think we learned a lot about ourselves. Well, I have a couple that I've been seeing in marital therapy where the wife hasn't slept in the same bed with her husband for 3 months because of the election. Because she said, I learned more about you during this election because he's a relatively quiet man and he doesn't say too much, but he got extremely involved in the election. And she said, I found out more what you believe in than I've known in 13 years of marriage.
Wow. But did she really? You know what I mean?
Well, I think she did, because his views became very obvious.
Okay.
And they were sort of under the rug before.
Right. But you know, and I'm not arguing with you about this, but I'm in a way I'm agreeing that I think a lot of us, if we thought about what was going on with ourselves during the election, I think we saw that Donald Trump, for instance, I mean, he threw convention right out the window. And he also, how could I say this? He decided that he was done with political correctness. And I think a lot of people said, whew, wow, because that is so tough, saying those words that we have to say in order to be accepted by the person you're talking to. You know, that person's black. These are some words you can't say. That person's Indian, and you can't say these things now. And so, I think what it did is it relieved a lot of people from having to be politically correct, and they embraced it. You know, oh, I'm free now. I'm free. I can say all these different things now, and people did. It seemed they really did.
Well, I think there was a lot of dissatisfaction years before Trump ran for the presidency. There was dissatisfaction with hearing Democrats always taking a Democratic stance, Republicans voting Republican, and nobody meeting in the middle and representing their state or their community. I think people were fed up with politicians sounding so politician-like, and that they wondered what they really think. You know, they all have pollsters. I have a client who's had a lobbying firm in D.C. for many years, and she said each one of them all the senators have pollsters. So she said you can be having breakfast with them in the morning, Republican or Democrat, and they can tell you one thing, but then when they find out what the polls are, in the afternoon they can be in front of a camera saying something different. And I think Americans were tired of that. So they were looking for someone that'd be more truthful. I'm not saying Trump is that person or isn't that person, but they were certainly disenchanted with what we had.
Right. And it is, I mean, it is a burden because it's a layer, you know, because you are brought up with those words that you might have said when you were a kid. You're brought up with that, and that kind of, that really sticks, doesn't it? When you learn something at 4, 5, 6, 7 years old.
Of course it does. The prejudices we have early on in life, because we don't have the ability to assess what the facts are, what the truth is. So we grow up and we live with prejudices about ourselves and about other people. This whole book is about unlearning what are fabrications and myths about ourselves or others. You know, yes, it's called The Stress Solution.
We all pause for the book. I heard the word "the book." Okay, that's my cue. No, I'm just kidding. So, you're saying we all have those stressors and...
Well, no one grows up in a completely objective environment. We have all grown up very early in life hearing things about ourselves and others that are untrue. It's our responsibility as adults to find out what the facts are. I mean, that's what I think maturity is about. That's what acquiring wisdom is about.
How true. I hope I get there. Gee. Just kidding.
I have faith in you.
Only kidding.
I have faith in you.
Thank you. Thank you. Obsessive compulsive urges. Now, how are those mitigated? Obsessive compulsive is somebody just keeps
obsessive
moving
compulsive
to the next thing that comes along?
It's an aspect of anxiety. It's another form of anxiety. So if you're anxious about a certain interaction with a friend or a spouse or a co-worker, maybe you start locking doors instead. Anxiety finds a focus that's more comfortable. So now you're locking doors instead of addressing the person you're upset with. It's a misdirection. All addictions are going down a side street on the way to try to pursue something directly. And when you don't know how to pursue it directly, or you're afraid to address your boss or your coworker or whoever, then you can easily start to obsess, because these things you can have control of. And for instance, children will develop obsessive behaviors in a family where they don't feel like they have much control, or the family's very chaotic. So they start doing certain things.
What would be an example of a child exhibiting a
biting their fingernails, scratching their arms.
Fingernail biting, there's a lot of that going on, isn't it?
There's a lot of people who are stressed. Yeah. So obsessive behavior is a form of anxiety. It's an indirect way to try to make yourself feel comfortable, because you're feeling uneasy about your ability to deal with conflict and deal with other people in your life.
Now, when he says you, he means someone else, not me. He is talking to me, but he's saying the second person
you
pronoun.
You have done very well for the 10 years you've been in therapy with me. You've come a long way. You've come a long way.
He's kidding. I haven't gone anywhere. Yeah. So that's what this has been all about. I do appreciate you coming by and
well, I appreciate
giving me this section.
I appreciate your having me.
But I'm not wrapping this up. I'm just.
You're not. Oh, I thought you were.
You thought, oh, I can go now. No, just kidding. So we got OCD. What is the, maybe you don't want to give this secret away, but there's got to be some disorder.
Yeah.
Because it's a difference between mental illness and mental disorder, I'm sure. I think I'm sure. Would someone with a disorder need to keep using your services or the services of another therapist, an incurable disorder?
Well, most disorders, which are really personality styles, like an avoidant personality or a paranoid personality, an obsessive personality, are very treatable. But this book is about something that's not about mental illness. Stress. Most Americans are stressed. 75% of Americans say they're stressed emotionally or physically every day. And 50% of Americans say they wake up every night due to stress. So these are not people that are mentally ill, or necessarily that they need to be in a clinical psychologist's office, but most Americans say that they are stressed and they don't really know what to do with it. What I'm trying to focus on is teaching people to use the capacity for empathy that we're all born with, because using that capacity helps us unlearn some of the distorted ways that we perceive. And perception, accurate perception, is the key to being calm. When we're calm, we produce calming neurochemicals. A simple interaction with someone can produce calming or destructive chemicals. This chemical cortisol that we produce when we're stressed, people don't realize, most of the people I think, that it causes weight gain, because it throws off the insulin levels, blood sugar insulin levels in the body, and it causes a craving for sugary substances.
Wow.
So it's very related to weight gain. It destroys neurons in the memory center of the brain. It causes inflammation. It causes anxiety, depression. It reduces the capacity to be empathic. It takes your wide lens camera of perceiving into a very narrow lens, so that you have repetitive obsessive thinking. So cortisol, a lot of people are living with a low level of cortisol all day long, and they don't realize it, and don't realize how it's harming their brain and their overall physiology.
And so they need to first buy the book.
Of course.
Yeah. And then
he's being paid a small amount of money to.
Yeah, and then get the number. I think it's in the phone book, and make an appointment with Dr. Ciaramicoli, and see all your stresses go away. Now, what do you do for drunk driving?
What do I do for drunk driving?
I mean, someone just got arrested for drunk driving, and they say, "Oh, doctor, I need to see you. I have this thing that's happening, and I don't know what to do. I have to go to court in 2 months, and I just don't know how to deal with this." Well, listen, I got one at 5, but I can bump then, and I'll see you.
Well, drunk driving is an interesting event in the sense that there are people that are arrested, especially this time of year. I had a woman last year who doesn't even drink. She went to a Christmas party. She drank too much, and she was arrested. And she had a DUI. And some people, for instance, they have a DUI because they're alcoholic, but you have to assess that accurately. Doesn't mean every human being who has a DUI is an alcoholic or has a problem with drinking. It depends. This time of year is very touchy because so many people are going to parties and probably drinking more than they usually do and not being very careful about driving. So obviously, as everyone has heard, don't drive when you're going to a party and drinking excessively. Make sure, and actually try not to drink excessively.
Exactly. Yeah, that's good advice. more advice here, by the way. So, so the person, does the person, they must admit to you that, yes, do you think anyone's putting you on when they say, I had a little too much at the party, and I never drink like this, ever, ever, ever. And then you find out that,
Well,
did they ever do that?
it's my job to figure out the truth. Again, that's where empathy comes in.
Oh, that's good. That's good that you can do that. And so this person, what does this person do? They're not going to see the court for another 2 months, and then they may get continued for whatever reason.
Well, if they have a drinking problem and they want to do something about it, Alcoholics Anonymous is available to everybody for free. There's meetings everywhere. You can get a sponsor, and that's all. And people will help you. And AA is one of the most helpful gathering of people who have had this problem and conquered it that you can ever be exposed to. So there are meetings everywhere. There are meetings every day, morning, noon, and night. And in fact, at this time of year, they have what they call a marathon meeting, an all-day Christmas Eve day, all day long, and all-day Christmas Day. You can go at any time.
And how does a person find where a meeting is? Is there like AA.com or something?
There is a website, and there's a book that anyone can obtain free, that tells you all the meetings in the Metro West area.
That's fantastic.
There's meetings even here in Hopkinton, by the way.
Let's see. Let me think a second.
You know that meeting you went to last week?
Yeah. Oh, I thought that was for something else. No, actually, I did walk in on one of the meetings with a camera around my neck, because it was at a building where they have several rooms, several meeting rooms. It was a church, and they have a large meeting room where the people from AA go. And so I walked in. There's several doors that go into the meeting room. So I walked in one door and I looked and I thought, no, this doesn't look like my meeting. I didn't make any judgment calls. I just did not see the people I thought I was going to see. So a day or two later, I ran into someone who I guess went later on that evening to the meeting, and he says, "Oh, I hear you got kicked out of the AA meeting." So it's pretty funny how people just look at a scene and now they've created an entire story.
Well, that's another example of distorted thinking, isn't it? Assuming without asking questions to find out what the facts are.
Right, and mind reading. I mean, so much of this mind reading lately. People telling me this and that.
And mind reading is one of the prime causes of the cognitive distortion that causes stress. Because most of the time we're incorrect. Human beings are very, very poor at being able to understand what's in another person's mind without asking questions.
Right. Yeah. So, so that was one experience, and then with AA, and then another time. And first of all, I have to say, I had some dear friends who were in that, part of that organization. And I mean part of the organization because they were led to these meetings every day for years. They went and they spoke at the meetings. Oh, I got a meeting I have to speak at. Oh, it sounds like they're an executive at a company, which that's a nice way to put it across to somebody else. You have a meeting and you're going to speak. So it's done a lot for a lot of people that I've known over the years. I think that some people, however, repeat the mantra, "I'm an alcoholic," to everybody. Years later, they're still saying, I'm an alcoholic. And it really, that kind of thing, I think after a while, they should have another level. Secret handshake or something.
The other level is I'm a recovering alcoholic. And then there's another level, I'm a recovered alcoholic. But an alcoholic, the ethic of AA is don't ever think you're not an alcoholic and you can't drink again. So the reason that they're describing themselves as such is to never get lax about it, to always be diligent about it, to remember when you're going into this party, I'm an alcoholic, I can't drink. I'm not somebody who can drink socially. If I start, I'm going to overdo it, I'm going to get into trouble. It's going to really be destructive in my life.
Yeah. So it works for most people in that way. I've just seen people that they just feed each other the stories. Well, we did. And I have a few of them. No, I'm not going to talk about them. I think I talked about them yesterday. Do you remember what Bromo salsa? I don't know. Is Bromo salsa still around?
I don't know.
It had a blue bottle. It was like blue glass that you find in
I remember.
on the side of the road somewhere. You go, oh, this really looks wonderful. This blue glass. So it looked very similar to. Now you may have heard from an older sibling or something about the windshield washer solvent of yesteryear, where it was an actual concentrate that you mixed with a couple gallons of water, and you mixed it up. And that blue bottle could go in your glove box, and when you want to mix it, you just take it out and mix it. Just make sure you don't grab the Bromo seltzer bottle, because it was the same color. Well, actually, the inverse is what you really want to watch out for. But that's all.
I'll try to remember that.
I don't think you'll have a problem with it. But yeah, so some of the people, though, it keeps them in it, because that's one of the levels. When I didn't know there were different levels, so when you were just telling me the levels, I understand it better, because some of these people must have been in the wrong level because they feed on each other.
Well, some people feed on their tragedy, and not just alcoholics, but some people will tell their story over and over again because they know that it will gather some sympathy from others. So that's not a constructive way of describing what's happened in your life. It's you're kind of using it because you don't think probably that you have anything else to offer. So you offer a tragic story. So it gets people involved. And of course, it's not a way to get people involved in a genuine way very long, because people get tired of that, hearing the same thing over and over again. Let me tell you how hard my life was. But there's a difference between that and people who are genuinely working on becoming better and trying to balance their lives.
Right. So I shouldn't even speak a negative about it, because it has helped so many people, and so many people I've known.
It's helped millions of people. Yeah.
So just look it up, and there you go. I don't want to stop now. We all gather around the computer and look the number up. Sometimes we'll plan one of these broadcasts. We'll plan it out. We'll say, well, let's talk about this. I mean, you can talk. You speak very well, and so
thank you.
Like I'm the critique you need, right? And so another incredible individual, I hope he's still alive, is Yefim Shubentsov, and he is the man people call the Russian. And as the first of the year,
the hypnotist.
He says he's not a hypnotist. I don't know what he is. He says he's a psychic healer. He says he goes into the brain and removes the urge to smoke from your brain. And I think there's a breath that goes along with it. Like when you close your eyes and think of smoking and raise your hand when you think of smoking. So he wants you to bring it back to that first puff in the morning. And so you think of it, and then you feel a breath. So I think the Russians, because he is Russian, I think they do a lot more of the orthodoxy, where there are more spiritual gifts in their thinking and in their society. So I'm sure that's a spiritual gift somewhere in the orthodoxy, that he would have that power to do that. And so he did it for me. He did it for
he did?
Yeah, he did it for a lot of people I know too. And when I went in, am I boring you? I just have to ask, you want to be sure you're not boring someone. But write this down. I can't recall that I know the number exactly, but it's Yefim Shubentsov, 1680A, Beacon Street in Brookline. And he's wonderful. Last time I knew it was $65, and you walk in, and you walk out and never smoke again.
Well, that's pretty amazing.
Right, especially since I was the type of person that, if it was 4 in the morning, and I didn't have butts, and I had promised myself I would quit the next day, I would convince myself that, well, it wasn't really the next day till 7 a.m. when I'm supposed to get up.
So how long have you not smoked?
Oh, at least 25.
Wow, that's great. That's great.
Yeah, it has to be 25 years. My kid says, "Oh, that's great. You quit smoking and you get cancer." Now, this is not a sob story. It was just a funny, very funny story.
Yeah, tell him it's not a correlation.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, my dad smoked 4 packs of Chesterfields a day.
Wow.
Yeah.
Could he wet his lip and put one there and let it stick?
No, he didn't do that.
No, my grandmother did that.
No, but he had the yellow fingers.
Oh, yeah.
And the ceilings would become yellow.
You know, there's a great story I heard about you. Actually, it was from you. So, of course, it would be great. Can you tell the story about the guidance counselor?
Oh, the guidance.
I love that story.
Well, when I was a senior in high school, they used to put pictures of seniors in the paper, like 10 every night in the local paper, and say where you were going to school. So I had got some scholarships to play football at some lesser-known colleges, and my guidance counselor called me in and he said, "We're not going to put that in the paper that you're going to go to." He said, "You're a football player. You don't study much. You skip school. You're only going to go to school and flunk out and embarrass your family and your community and your school." So he gave me all the brochures of 5. I think it was Coast Guard, Army, Marines, Navy, and Army. And he said, "Go home, pick one of those, talk it over with your family, and come back and let me know what you want to do. We'll put that in the paper." So I went down the street, and my father had a little furniture store, and I said, "I'm not going to go to college." "Why? I thought you said you were going to college." I said, "No, I'm not going to go because Mr. Martin said that, and I told him the story, and he goes, "Oh, really?" I said, "Yeah," and he goes, "Well, let's go in and see him tomorrow." I said, No, I don't want you coming in." Anyway, so my father put his suit on and he went in, and this is, I use this story as teaching as an example of empathy. So Mr. Martin had 2 big degrees on the wall, a bachelor's degree and a master's degree. In those days, you used to put the big one, in the frames, and my father sat down in his suit and he was listening, and Mr. Martin said, "I'm glad you came in, and I want to tell you why I think your son should go in the Army, the Marines, the Coast Guard, the Navy, blah, blah." And my father kept going like this. And going. So after about 40 minutes of this, he said, "Well, I'm glad you understand what I'm saying, Mr. Ciaramicoli." And my father stood up and he shook his hand and he said, "I'm glad you understand what I mean." He goes, "Well, I want to thank you." And he said, "Well, I'm glad we're on the same page." And he goes, "Well, no, I'm not on the same page, but, I'm not a college man, and I had never met anyone who's gone to college, and I listened to you speak for 40 minutes. And you not only have one of those college degrees, you've got 2, and now I realize my son can go to college."
Yes, because my son's as smart as, and so that was a great, that's a great example of someone out of their depth, I guess.
Yes, and it's also a great example of empathy, because rather than being a parent who was defensive, and what are you saying about he wanted to listen to him and understand, where are you coming from? What are you basing this on? And he realized over time, over those 40 minutes, that he wasn't really basing it on much.
Right.
And he didn't even really know me.
Right, and so do you remember what he based it on?
He we used to have tracks in school, and he was an English teacher and a guidance counselor, and he focused on the kids that were very studious, and I was not one of those kids at the time. And those are the kids that he evolved. He did not particularly like people who were into athletics. That was not something that he valued very much.
Yeah, that's too bad, because that can teach you, athletics can teach you why you should value athletics.
Yes.
And all the little lessons you get along the way, and I'll never forget when he was a catcher. Boy was a catcher, and we're all around 10, 11 years old. On the playing baseball, and his dad was the coach of that baseball team. And I'll never forget, the kid was a catcher, and wherever the ball was, after it went in his glove, he did this. I thought, who's that kid think he's kidding? Because the umpire he's right there, he must see it. And so those little lessons you get along the way about sportsmanship and humility. I'm still looking for the humility, but I'm sure someday I'll figure it out. That was a good story about your dad. And he had a furniture store. Did you ever do any selling?
No. I did some delivering, and actually wanted to go into the business with my father, and he looked at me and he said, no. If you come in this business, you're going to give the whole store away. You need to go to college and learn something.
Learn how not to.
You need to learn something.
That's great. What else could an individual take away after reading this?
Well, basically, that learning that we all grow up with some biases toward ourselves and others. We can unlearn them, and the book really is focused on teaching people how to use empathy to unlearn some of the biases. Because the way we talk to ourselves every day changes our brain chemistry. If you wake up in the morning and some of the old conditioning you had, you start criticizing yourself. I look terrible, I'm not that smart, I'm stupid. All of those familiar records that we keep repeating produce cortisol and produce that negative stress hormone that really defeats us before we even get started in our day. And we have to try to recognize those records that we've been repeating all our lives that are not necessarily based on the truth. And we can't do this alone. We need to share it with other people that are trying to do the same thing and give and receive feedback. Because when we give and receive empathy, we produce oxytocin, which is a numerical neurotransmitter, which makes people live longer, it reduces inflammation, it increases generosity, makes us feel more secure, and it bonds us to other people. So empathy, giving and receiving, produces a chemical change in our brains that makes us feel connected and healthier. When we're stressed and we're repeating negativity to ourselves or about other people, we produce cortisol, which really defeats us and really has negative consequences for our brain and our overall physiology.
So, get rid of the stress, have empathy, understand other people, listen to what they say. So we've taken a lot. Well, what else could you put on that list that we're taking away this evening?
It's the holidays, and remember when you go, a lot of people are telling me they're complaining about they got to sit next to Uncle Frank, or they got to see their sister who they're in conflict with, or their mother's always critical. And when you go for your Christmas or Hanukkah get-together, remember, leave your longings at the door. We already know all the players. We know who they are. Don't go in trying to expect a new mother, a new father, a new brother, a new sister. Try to live with who the people are and not take it so personal, rather than getting yourself stressed by longing for something that doesn't exist.
Okay, and let's say you have that conflict and it's still ongoing. Do you ever promote meditation? Or
yes, I'm certainly a believer in meditation.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that can help some people leave the baggage at home?
I think it can calm you, but and meditation is important because it produces a chemical change that's very positive. But you also have to, most importantly, perceive accurately and be able to differentiate what's personal and what's situational. If your father's a critical man and he criticizes you at Christmas time, that's what he does. It's not
right.
When we're children, we don't realize that it's not about us. We take it in a very personal way because we don't have the ability to determine where it's coming from.
Right.
Today we're adults. We should, that's the way the person is. They're probably that way to everybody, not just me or you.
Right. Yeah. Well, definitely that way to me. Just kidding. So, have we talked enough?
I think so.
Anything else on the list? The list of the stress solution.
Well, my website, balanceyoursuccess.com, has a lot of information about the book and other books I've written, and my blogs are there if people are interested.
What a fantastic photo, too. I don't know if you can see the photo. Great photo. Well, we don't know who's coming next week, but I'm so happy. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas, Bob.
And everything else, Happy New Year. Dr. Arthur Ciaramicoli, The Stress Solution, the Power of Empathy, that's another one. I read every word of that, maybe twice. That was a while ago.
Yeah, that was a while ago.
But it's still valid today. Empathy hasn't changed. And so we're so appreciative that you could come again. And I think there might not be anyone for next week either. I'm just kidding. So we've got some olive branches out to people who might come next Friday. So we'll see what happens and see who's available, see who would like to. We should really have like ongoing guests. Mm-hmm. Like you look at the, I don't watch the late night stuff anymore, but the Letterman show and the Carson show, they would have repeat guests. Don Rickles would be on quite often, and so on. So we look forward to the next time. Okay. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas to you folks. Good night.